الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. So, welcome and thank you as always for coming, making time or taking time out of your Monday evening to join us to remind ourselves of Allah and our duty to Him, and to work on ourselves to make ourselves better worshippers of Allah and better humans, inshallah ta'ala. So, our current series is Love and Marriage in Islam. And this is part 4 in that series. And it is entitled Relationship Maintenance, the Marriage Repair Toolkit. Relationship Maintenance, the Marriage Repair Toolkit. Now, before we begin with the topic, I just wanted to mention one housekeeping item, and that is that next week is likely to be the last week for this series. The next week, it may take 2 sessions, I doubt it, but it may, which would ultimately mean that January 10th or January 17th will begin our next series, which we mentioned previously will be a commentary on Kitab At-Tawheed. I'm encouraging everyone to purchase the book, the English translation of the book, because we'll be using the text to study from. And it's good to have it so you can see it in your hands, what's being said, what's being commented on, and make notes, etc. So this will be a little bit more formal or structured class, a little bit more academic, but nothing overwhelming. But this is a very, very important topic, as you all know. It is the crux, it is the cornerstone of our religion at Tawheed, and it's important for us to revisit these fundamental topics min heenan ila akhar, from time to time. طيب. So let me open tonight's discussion by saying that the devil is extremely keen to cause mischief and wreak havoc in the life of every Muslim. That's his job. That's his number one task, is to make our lives as miserable spiritually and unproductive spiritually as possible. And some mischief is more beloved to shaitan than other mischief. And there's no form of mischief which is more beloved to the shaitan than separating between a man and his wife, sowing the seeds of discord between a Muslim husband and a Muslim wife. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, وَاتَّبَعُوا مَا تَتْلُو الشَّيَاطِينُ عَلَى مُلْكِ سُلَيْمَانَ وَمَا كَفَرَ سُلَيْمَانُ وَلَكِنَّ الشَّيَاطِينَ كَفَرُوا يُعَلِّمُونَ النَّاسَ السِّحْرَ. He says, they instead followed the magic promoted by the devils during the reign of Solomon. Never did Solomon disbelieve, but the devils disbelieved. They taught people magic. And what exactly was the magic that these devils taught? Allah goes on to say, يُفَرِّقُونَ بَيْنَ الْمَرْءِ وَزَوْجِهِ. They would cause, through their sorcery, a rift to be created between husband and wife. Their magic was they would teach people how to cause a husband to turn away from his wife, or a wife to turn away from her husband. That was their magic. In the hadith collected by Muslim, on the authority of Jabir ibn Abd'Llah radiyallahu anhu, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, إِنَّ إِبْلِيسَ يَضَعُ عَرْشَهُ الْمَاءِ ثُمَّ يَبْعَثُ سَرَايَاهُ فَأَدْنَاهُمْ مِنْهُ مَنْزِلَةً أَعْظَمُهُمْ فِتْنَةً. He says that Iblis sets his throne upon a body of water, then deploys his units of minions, these different platoons of shayateen, doing his bidding, sends them out to create mischief, make trouble in the world, sow discord, make the Muslims sin, do these dirty deeds. The one who earns the highest station with Satan is the one who causes the most corruption, the one who does the most egregious thing. This is the one who he will give a certain manzila, a certain status with him. يجيء أحدهم فيقول فعلت كذا وكذا فيقول الشيطان ما صنعت شيئا ثم يجيء أحدهم فيقول ما تركت فلانا حتى فرقت بينه وبين امرأته قال فيدنيه منه ويقول نعم أنت. So the Prophet ﷺ goes on, he says, these minions of the shaitan, they go out and they return from their mischief making. They return from their missions to report to the shaitan what they did and to try to earn that special status. So one of them comes and says, I have done such and such. Maybe he says, I made a Muslim tell a lie. I made a Muslim drink alcohol. I made a Muslim steal. I made a Muslim backbite. And the shaitan says, Ma sana'ta shay'an. You haven't done anything. I'm not impressed. Then one of them comes and says, I pestered so and so and did not cease in my suggestions. I didn't cease telling him things and say, hey, do this and do this and say that until I separated between him and his wife. So then Satan, he invites that devil, that minion, to come close. And he says, what a good job you have done. You're the one who did something worth mention. And in some other riwayat, it says that the shaitan does what? He embraces him. Brothers and sisters, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't want us to give up on our marriages. And He wants us to resist the suggestions of the devil to part ways. He wants us as much as possible to make these marriages work. He says in the Quran, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا فَبَعَثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا إِنْ يُرِيدَ إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقِ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ عَلِيمًا حَكِيمًا عَلِيمًا خَبِيرًا. He says, if you fear that the two spouses will part ways, appoint a mediator from his family and a mediator from her family. If they desire reconciliation, Allah will restore harmony between them. Surely Allah is all-knowing, all-aware. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when these problems occur and the shaitan is making these suggestions, He doesn't want us to give in to the shaitan. He wants us to what? To fight for these marriages and make them work. When our marriages are broken, He wants us to fix them. When problems occur, He wants us to strive to solve them. And if you remember last week, we talked about how marriage is actually ibadah. It's actually an act of worship. It's a means of getting close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We learned from the hadith in which the Prophet said, إِذَا تَزَوَّجَ الْعَبْدُ فَقَدْ اسْتَكْمَلَ نِصْفَ دِينِهِ. If a servant, if an individual gets married, they have completed half of their faith, of their religion. And so what that teaches us is we're supposed to be as keen to correct our marriages, to make our marriages good, to be good husbands, to be good wives, just like we're keen to offer prayer correctly, keen to fast correctly and get our fast accepted. We should be as keen, because the Prophet said it's not just part of the deen, he said it's half of the deen. So all of this work that we're supposed to put in to improve our marriages and to be good husbands, be good wives, it requires that we use certain tools. Just imagine yourself going to work, doing, for example, some carpentry project, doing some electrical work, and there's certain tools of the trade, right? And you have this tool belt, and depending on what the actual specific problem that you're dealing with or the repair you're going to make, there's a certain tool that you use to do this and a certain tool that you use to do that. You have that belt, And if you have all the right tools, you can do the repairs. So tonight, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to mention the main tools that every couple needs to have in their tool belt, and know when and how to use those tools in order to solve problems when they occur in their marriage, and to get back on track when they've lost their way. And so before we mention the individual tools and talk about them in detail, I'm going to give a list of the headings. Just give a list of the tools, and then we'll take each one by one and talk about it in a little bit more detail. So the first tool is introspection. The second tool is a taghaful, or overlooking. The third tool is advise and be advisable. The fourth tool is compromise. Number 5, actively strive to draw closer to your spouse. Number 6, communicate effectively. And number 7, the final one, intervention. So we'll take those 7 and we'll look at each one in a little bit more detail. So the first one we said was introspection. Brothers and sisters, in most cases in a marriage, when there are problems, in most cases both partners are contributing to the issues they are facing. So when our marriage becomes unhappy or unfulfilling, before we blame our partner, it's all your fault. We should look at ourselves and look into ourselves. What are we doing or failing to do, which is creating conflict or preventing resolution? This is the question we should ask ourselves. Things are not working out. What am I doing? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says in the Quran, Surah Al-Ra'd, the 13th surah, the 13th chapter, verse number 11, He says, Inna Allah la yughayyiru ma biqawmin hatta yughayyiru ma bi anfusihim. Indeed, Allah will never change a people's condition until and unless they change what is in themselves. You want things to get better? Do your part. Change you. Fix you. And the Prophet said in the hadith collected by Muslim on authority of Jabir, he said, Ibda' bi nafsik. He said, begin with yourself first. When things are going badly in our relationships, brothers and sisters, the first and easiest thing to do is to blame the other person. To say, and many of us sometimes we fall into this, we have to be careful. We say, if only my partner would just do this, everything would be fine. If only my partner would stop doing that, if they would just act right, if they would just do what they're supposed to do, everything would be fine. But the fact of the matter is that if we are experiencing problems, more often than not, we are contributing to the problems we're experiencing. There's some contribution that we are making some contribution, we're doing something that's contributing to the problem. So it behooves us to take a step back and try to figure out what role we are playing in the mess our relationship has become. And doing introspection, this practice of looking at yourself and looking into yourself, self-reflection, self-contemplation, it makes sense for us to do this for 2 reasons. So by doing introspection, number 1, you model the behavior you desire from your spouse and show them that you are committed to making this work. See, if I want my spouse to change, there's some things that, I wish that they would change. Then one of the best ways for me to get them to change is if I make my own changes, if I clean up my own act. Because this makes it easy for me to say, you need to clean up your act. Because why? I'm not asking you to do something I'm not prepared to do or already doing. I'm modeling the behavior that I want them to, and they won't be able to say, well, you're not doing it. You guys see that? Which is one of the quickest ways that people make excuses not to do what they're supposed to do, is because what? You're not doing it too. So if you're already doing it, if you're already engaged in that, it puts you in a position where, you can ask that person because I'm already modeling the behavior, and I'm already doing the thing that I'm asking to do. Not asking to do something that I'm not prepared to do. That's the first reason. The second reason is when you do introspection, when you do self-contemplation, you are busying yourself with what you can change as opposed to what you can't. Because at the end of the day, the only person you can really work on is who? Is yourself. As much as others may need to change, they may really need to change, or we may want them to change, the only person we exercise complete control over, the only person that we can shape and mold and change, really change, as we please, as we choose, is the person that stares us back in the mirror every time we look in the mirror. Ourselves. And so it makes sense for us to start what? To start there, to start working on ourselves. Like the second tool in our repair kit is overlooking. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, وَإِذَا سَرَّ النَّبِيُّ إِلَى بَعْضِ أَزْوَاجِهِ حَدِيثًا فَلَمَّا نَبَّأَتْ بِهِ وَأَظْهَرَهُ اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ عَرَّفَ بَعْضَهُ وَأَعْرَضَ عَنْ بَعْضٍ. He says, remember when the Prophet confided in one of his wives, telling her a secret to be held in the strictest confidence. When she disclosed it, when she told the secret of the Prophet, Allah revealed her disclosing to His messenger. Allah informed the messenger of Allah, your wife has disclosed the secret. And the Prophet, he revealed some of what Allah had told him and overlooked some of it. So when he went and told her, hey, you told the secret. You said this. He didn't tell her everything she said. He let some of it go. He overlooked it. In this verse, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, through His words, and the Prophet through his actions, they're teaching us a very important tool which we should use to solve problems in our marriage. And that is at-taghaful, overlooking. Now somebody would say that seems counterintuitive. How can you solve a problem by overlooking it, by ignoring it? And the answer is that sometimes the problem itself is not overlooking. The fact that sometimes we have a tendency to over-scrutinize, over-analyze, that's the problem. And so in those cases, overlooking is the solution. Brothers and sisters, one of the mistakes that many spouses make that sows the seeds of discord in their relationships is they subject their spouse to intense scrutiny. They overanalyze every statement and action. They investigate all of their activity and interrogate them at every turn. There are few people, brothers and sisters, that can be subjected to this kind of scrutiny and maintain their sanity, let alone feel comfortable and happy in their relationship when they are constantly being put under the microscope. So it is very important if we want to foster tranquility. And remember, we talked about what marriage is supposed to achieve according to Allah's will and what Allah wants marriage to achieve. And one of the things that Allah wants marriage to achieve is peace and tranquility. Wants the man to be at peace, wants the wife to be at peace, as He says, وَمِنْ آيَاتِهِ أَنْ خَلَقَ لَكُم مِّنْ أَنفُسِكُمْ أَزْوَاجًا لِتَسْكُنُوا إِلَيْهَا. And from His signs is He created for you from yourselves mates to find what? Tranquility and repose. I'm going to ask you honestly. If you're always under the microscope, always being scrutinized, everything you do is going to be questioned. Do you feel tranquil? Do you feel at ease? Do you feel on edge? You feel on edge. You don't have peace of mind. You don't feel tranquil because why? You're worried about where's the next criticism going to come from? Where's the next scrutiny going to come from? Where's the next interrogation going to come from? What am I going to be asked about next? If we want to avoid this and create and foster the tranquility that Allah wants us to foster, then we have to learn to overlook some things and not everything. Because Allah says, عَرَّفَ بَعْضَهُ وَأَعْرَضَ عَنْ بَعْضٍ. He told us some of it and looked and overlooked some of it. We don't have to overlook everything. And we're going to talk about this shortly. There's some things you can't, it's not even permissible for you to overlook. But we have to learn to overlook some things. And I'm going to be honest with you. This is something I had to learn. I'm still learning. My wife is still teaching me that. You have to learn to what? To overlook some stuff. And you can't expose your family to a level of scrutiny that puts them on edge and deprives them of the tranquility that you're required to create for them, to foster for them. Ibn Muflih, in his book Al-Adab al-Shar'iyyah, he quotes Imam Ahmad as saying when he was asked, Aina najidu al-afiyah. A man came to Imam Ahmad rahimahullah ta'ala and he asked him, he said, where can we find happiness and well-being? Where are we going to find this? What do we need to do to foster this? فقال الإمام أحمد رحمه الله تعالى وجدت 9 أعشار العافية في التغافل عن الزلات. He said, I found 9/10 of happiness and well-being comes from overlooking the faults of others. I'm OCD. I want everything has a place, everything in its place. Why is this turned this way? It should be straight like this. And I had to learn to what? Be quiet about stuff like that. Oh, I'm still learning. But you can't do that to your spouse. And you'll be happy and they'll be happy if you learn to what? To let some things go. Like number 3 from the tools, advise and be advisable. So now it's impossible, brothers and sisters, we all think we can recognize this and acknowledge this, that it's impossible for 2 people to be in a relationship and to be in that close of a proximity to each other and to interact with each other with this heightened frequency. They're always interacting with each other and there's not going to be some friction. There's not going to be, sometimes intentionally, sometimes inadvertently, that you're going to get on the other person's nerves. You're going to annoy them. You're going to vex them. That's not possible. In some cases, the things that we do to annoy our spouse have more to do with them than us. We haven't necessarily done anything wrong, but because we're always with each other, they've lost the ability to tolerate certain things. Right? We haven't done anything wrong, but they're kind of tired of us, basically. At that moment, they're tired of us. They're tired of certain behaviors, certain things that we say, certain things we do. We haven't necessarily done anything wrong, but what? Because you're always in close proximity, you get on each other's nerves. But in other cases, we are actually doing something wrong. Sometimes the wrong thing we're doing something wrong religiously speaking. It's wrong in our religion, what we're doing. And sometimes we're doing something that's wrong socially. Not religiously, but socially. It's not socially acceptable what you're doing. Or we're doing something which is wrong given our domestic situation. Given our situation, you shouldn't be doing that. Right? So for example, religiously, let's say for example, one of the spouses smokes. Right? One of the spouses goes out and wears clothing which reveals parts of their body which are not allowed to reveal. Doing something wrong religiously. Doing something wrong socially. Socially unacceptable, but not religiously unacceptable might be, I don't know, give me an example of something socially unacceptable. I should have wrote something down, shouldn't I?
Big fighting.
Huh? Well, that's religiously unacceptable. Give me something social unacceptable. It's not proper in the traditions and the customs of the people. Right? I don't know, maybe they wear something which it's like, they wear something which is not haram, but it's something which makes you, for example,
a Confederate flag.
Okay, so ahsan. Good. So a person wears something like that, And it's just like socially unacceptable to wear that. Or they do something which is wrong given their domestic situation. Things are tight, and the person goes out and spends a lot of money on something which they don't need. Like somebody buys a brand new pair of sneakers, and because of it, they can't cover the rent, for example. In our domestic situation, you shouldn't be doing that. Or they may do all of the above. So we talked about, just a second ago, we talked about overlooking. But in these cases, sometimes we're not permitted religiously to overlook. Or we're not permitted personally. Or personally, we're just not able to bring ourselves to look past whatever the person is doing. So in those cases, our religion teaches us to try to eradicate the behavior entirely, or to at least what? Minimize it. By advising our spouse. We're supposed to what? Employ this tool of what? Of giving advice to eradicate the behavior if it's something which we can't look past, either because it's not permissible to look past it, or we just can't bring ourselves personally to look past it. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَاللَّاتِ تَخَافُونَ نُشُوزَهُنَّ فَعِيذُهُنَّ. He says, and if you face ill conduct from women, advise them. And in the hadith collected by Muslim, from Abi Sa'id al-Khudri radiyallahu anhu, the Prophet ﷺ said, مَنْ رَأَ مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرًا فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ فَلَّمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ. He said, whoever amongst you witnesses wrongdoing, then let him physically put a stop to it. If he is unable to do so with his hand, then let him do so with his tongue by advising. And the hadith of Tamim al-Dari, also collected by Muslim, the Prophet said, ad-dinu an-nasiha. He said, religion is being sincere and advising sincerely. This is important to think about, to reflect upon these three texts that we just mentioned. Because they teach us that when our spouse gives us advice, they are doing their job and they're fulfilling their religiously mandated duty. And this is important for us to understand and to foster this atmosphere of mutual advising. People feel comfortable, welcome. They feel that their advice is welcomed. Why? Because in many marriages, when one spouse gives advice to the other spouse, that spouse who's receiving advice gets upset, gets bent out of shape. And this creates more problems. Instead of them accepting the advice, especially if it's given appropriately, they get mad, they get arrogant. Who are you to tell me anything? Well, what about you? I can tell you some things that you do wrong. Instead of just accepting the advice, remembering that the goal is not to win the argument. The goal is to fix the marriage, to make it an Islamic acceptable marriage, to beautify our marriage and make it acceptable to Allah, a means to draw close to Allah, like we do with our salat, like we do with our pilgrimage, like we do with our fasting, etc. And we have to acknowledge, brothers and sisters, that none of us is perfect. And no one is more qualified to point out our imperfections than the closest person to us and the one who knows us like no one else. This is the best person to give you advice. So accept the advice. And here I just want to give some helpful tips for giving and accepting advice. Ala ujala. The first one, choose an appropriate time. So suppose you want to advise your spouse, but it's clear that they're upset about something or they're in a bad mood. They've got a lot going on at work. They've got a lot going on in their family. They've got a lot going on in their life. They're clearly upset. They might be experiencing depression. They might be angry. They might be frustrated. They might be trying to overcome challenges in their life, whatever it is. If it's clear that they're not in the best state of mind to receive the advice appropriately, then don't advise them. Just delay. Put it off. And this is what some people, they make the advice more about them than about the person they're trying to advise. It's like, remember why you're supposed to be doing this. You're supposed to be doing it to bring about reform, to rehabilitate, to make things better, not to make them worse, which brings us to the second tip, which is to check your intentions. Don't advise to humiliate. Don't advise to deride. Don't lie. Don't advise to belittle. I'm going to put you in your place. I'm going to let you know who's boss. No, that's not why we advise. We advise because we want to make our spouse better, help them to improve, so the marriage will improve. Like number 3 from the tips, check your emotions at the door. When a couple, they sit down to hash out some issues and to give each other advice, there's no place for emotion. And if emotions get involved in that conversation, it won't go well. Got to check the emotions at the door. This is not about how I feel, how you feel. It's about the problems, identifying the problems, where I may be contributing to the problems, where you may be contributing, and how we're gonna fix it. Check the emotions at the door. Number 4, be civil. Advise gently. Criticize constructively. And maintain a mild tone. One of the problems when we advise, it turns into the hurling of insults. It turns into a bunch of put downs. That's not healthy. That's not constructive. Be constructive. Another tip, be fair. Be fair. I think a lot of you are familiar with the hadith where the Prophet said that the most of the people who will be in hellfire will be women. There was a woman in the audience who heard that, and she said, "Why, O Messenger of Allah? Why is it?" And she didn't ask why. Min bab al-i'tiraf. She didn't ask why as if to say, that's not fair. She asked why to know there has to be a reason. What is the reason so I can avoid that behavior? So the Prophet, he said that they curse a lot. وَيَكْفُرْنَ الْعَشِيرِ. He said they curse a lot and they deny the favors of their husbands. If a man were to be good to them for a long period of time, generous to a fault, always there, kind, merciful, compassionate, loving, and then she sees one thing from him that she doesn't like, she'll say, مَا رَأَيْتَ مِنْكَ خَيْرًا قَطْ. I have never seen any good from you. You've never done nothing for me. The Prophet said this is why women are most of the people in the hellfire. Because they use these absolutes. Honestly. Very few women and very few men can say, my husband's never done anything for me. My wife has never done anything for me. Very few people can use these absolutes. Why? Because as Ibn al-Qayyim said, مَا خَلَقَ اللَّهُ شَرًّا مَحْضًا. Allah has not created something which is absolutely evil. Everything Allah created, there's some good in it, even shaitan. So you don't have a man who doesn't do anything good. You don't have a woman who doesn't do anything good. You don't have a woman who never did anything good for you. And vice versa. Woman says, you never helped me with the kids. They're arguing, you never helped me with the kids. He never helped you with the kids? Never? Not once? Husband's arguing with the wife. You never have my back. I never have your back? Never? Come on. Maybe not as much as you would like me to, but to say I never have your back, that's just not these absolutes. You never wash the dishes. Come on, you remember that time? Right? So the point I'm saying, be fair. When you argue, be fair. Be fair. It's not fair to say you never, but I do feel. And that's how we operate. But don't say never, don't use absolutes. Be fair. That's not the only way you can not be fair. Sometimes we know what the person meant when they said something in an argument. But the words, if we take them literally, can be used against them. So we use it against them. Although I know that's not what you meant. That's not being fair. And Allah knows what's inside yourself. He knows what you hide from your spouse. You make the spouse think, I really thought you meant that. But I know you didn't mean that, but it's useful. It's useful for me to what? To say, yeah, you said this. And I know you didn't mean that. Be fair. Another tip, do not be judgmental. Don't be prosecutorial. We can get it. We can say that. Prosecutorial. Which means your wife is not on trial. Your husband is not on trial. You're trying to sort out problems. You're not trying to determine whether or not this person should be on death row or not. No. Don't make your spouse feel like they're on trial when you're giving them nasiha. And last but not least, don't hold a grudge. Once you've aired your grievance, move on and put it behind you. I said what I had to say. This is what I need from you. This is how I hope you'll conduct yourself moving forward. And now whatever happened. It's gone. It's water under the bridge. Can't hold grudges because it creates bitterness. It creates resentment. And those are marriage destroyers. The next tool is compromise. Ahmed rahimahullah ta'ala has collected, Al-Bukhari has also allaqa. He also reported the hadith in mu'allaq form, jaziman bihi, indicating in his opinion that the hadith was authentic. The Prophet ﷺ said from the hadith of Ibn Abbas, he said, Ahabbu al-adyani ila Allahi al-hanifiyya as-samha. He said, the most beloved approach to Allah in religion is that of tolerant monotheism. And what this hadith does, it points to one of the characteristics that Allah wants the believers to adopt, to embody, particularly with the people they love. And that's a samaha, tolerance, compromise, and going along to get along. As long as doing that doesn't involve sin. As long as doing that does not involve sin. In other words, we're encouraged to what? To compromise. To meet our spouse in the middle, especially with those we love whenever we can. The Prophet was like this, alayhi salam. So that's one reason why we should do it, because it's the example of the Prophet. Allah says, لَقَدْ كَانَ لَكُمْ فِي رَسُولِ اللَّهِ أُسْوَةٌ حَسَنَةٌ. You have the Messenger of Allah, the most excellent example. What was he like? Ibn al-Qayyim, he mentions, as he's describing how the Prophet was his wives, he says, وَكَانَ إِذَا هَوِيَتْ شَيْءٍ لَا مَحْذُورَ فِيهِ تَابَعَهَا عَلَيْهِ. The Prophet, when he would interact with Aisha, whenever she wanted to do something, and there was nothing haram in it, there was nothing wrong with it, it wasn't really his druthers, wasn't his thing, but if she wanted to do it and there was nothing wrong with it, he would go along. He would just go along. He would do whatever it was that she wanted to do, even though it wasn't his thing. For example, she wants to go to the botanical gardens and look at foliage and look at flowers, right? And that's just not his thing. He has no interest whatsoever. But he goes. Right? Compromise. We have 6 hours on a Saturday afternoon to spend together. No interruptions. Let's figure out what we're going to do. Oh, they got this botanical gardens, blah, 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 blah. I really not. Come on. That's what she wants to do. Tabaha alayh. He would just go along with her. Vice versa. Husband wants to go to like some boat show. I want to buy a boat. She's like, I'm not in the boat. But what? She goes along. They compromise. You guys see that? Last week you went to the botanical gardens. Come on, this week we can go to a boat show. They compromise. Another reason why this is important is because if we do otherwise, rather than prevent problems, because compromising, what does it do? It prevents problems. It's a diffuser for problems. But if you don't do it, if you don't compromise, if you always insist on having your way, it creates problems or that weren't there, or it exacerbates existing problems. Because when you always insist on having it your way, this is what we're going to do. We're going to do this because I say so. Your spouse is going to feel less and less like a partner and more like an indentured servant. More and more like my spouse is in this marriage by themselves. And I'm just here to serve their needs. That's very frustrating. It's a very frustrating feeling. And it only makes your spouse unhappy, and consequently will make your marriage unhappy. And this is why it's so important to what? To compromise. طيب, ثم بعد ذلك, it's 8:18, but I think we can get out of here on time. طيب, we got 3 more to go. طيب, the next one is actively strive to draw closer to your spouse. That you make it your business a point to draw closer and closer to your spouse. As Allah says, هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ هُنَّ لِبَاسٌ لَكُمْ وَأَنْتُمْ لِبَاسٌ لَهُنْ. If you guys remember earlier on, we quoted that ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, they, your wives, are a libas, a garment for you, and you are a garment for them. And we said that that garment has 4 meanings. One of the meanings is lihaf, a wrapper. Something which is wrapped tightly around something else, which is an indication of what? Of closeness. That basically, this is the closest person to you. They are supposed to be extremely close to you, and you're supposed to be extremely close to them. It's something we're supposed to foster, this closeness, this feeling of closeness. So how do we do that? What are some practical ways to do that? I'm going to give you those out of ujala. The first one is change things up and abandon routines. If we keep doing the same thing over and over and over with our spouse, what happens to the marriage? It gets stale. Like bread that gets left out overnight. It gets stale, right? The same thing can happen to a marriage. It just becomes stale. Allah doesn't want our marriages to be stale. The Prophet ﷺ in his example is showing we shouldn't let our marriages become stale. We should do what? Change the routine. We normally do this. Let's do something different. Let's do something spontaneous. Right? Number 2, spend quality time. I mean, real quality time. Doing something together that you like to do, or something you really don't like to do, but you do it together. It's the fall, or kind of the fall, winter. I mean, I don't even know down here, right? Al-Muhim, yards are full of leaves. And those leaves got to get raked up. So they go out there together, and they rake up the leaves. End of summer, going into fall, the nice flowers that they plant in the spring starting to die. Weeds are starting to sprout. We got to go and weed and get up all these dead flowers, etc., and prepare the land for what? For next spring. They go out there and do that together. There's some grocery shopping that has to be done. They go do that together, but they do it together. They go to the gym together. They go walking together. They sit and watch a documentary together. And muhim, they make it a point to do things together. Maybe the wife is washing dishes, she washes, he dries. Whatever it is. But they try to make it a point to what? To do things together, to spend quality time together, to sit and just talk to each other. Ask each other, for example, about their childhood. Just ask them questions. That's why I want to know you. I want to get to know you so I can get closer to you. Tell me about when you were in elementary school. What school did you go to? How many friends did you have? Tell me something weird that happened to you. They share a laugh. Maybe they share a cry. But they share these moments together. They make it a point to spend quality time. But another one, and I'm not being inappropriate by saying this. I want you to be clear that what I'm going to say, I'm not being inappropriate. And pay attention to the wording. Make love with your spouse. I didn't say to, I said make love with your spouse. But that means 2 things. One, it certainly means intimacy. Being intimate with your spouse. As Allah said, we mentioned the ayah, libas. One of the meanings of libas, we said, is firash. A bed. Somebody that you share intimacy with. Somebody that you find sexual gratification in. You do things as it relates to intimacy that makes it easier for your spouse to find gratification. Which means the word no has no place in the bedroom. For the most part, I'm not saying there are not some exceptions, but generally speaking, there's no in the bedroom. And number 2, you make yourself attractive to your spouse. You strive to make yourself someone who your spouse will enjoy being with in that way, and vice versa. As Ibn Abbas, he said, Inni uhibbu an atazayyanu laha kama uhibbu an tatazayyan li. He said, I love to make myself look nice for my spouse, Just like I like for my spouse to make herself look nice for me. And nowadays, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has facilitated all these wasa'il, all these means for us to do what? To make ourselves look better. There's all kinds of supplements. There's gyms everywhere. There's videos on YouTube that teach you how you can work out at home and get in shape. How you can, build your body. You can trim fat. You can, increase your testosterone, whatever. Videos teach women how to beautify themselves, put on nice makeup, right? How to put together nice outfits so when their husband comes home, they look attractive. All this is present for us. Are we utilizing it to make love with our spouse? And making love with your spouse is not just intimacy, it's also endearing acts of kindness. As it came in the hadith, tahadu tahabu. Give gifts. This will foster what? Love. And a gift could be something as simple as a candy that they like. A gift could be something as simple as what? As a risala. It could be something as simple as a message on WhatsApp that says, I love you. You're special. You mean everything to me. It could be something as simple as that. This is what we mean by make love with your spouse, and this is what we're talking about, or some of the things we're talking about to actively strive to what? To draw closer to your spouse. The next two, and I'm going to have to say these quickly because we want to close on time. The next tool, number 6, is communicate effectively. And the importance of communication cannot be overstated. It is probably the single most important tool, but is the most seldom used or the one which is most poorly utilized. Most marriages are ruined because of the couple's failure or refusal to communicate. One or both of the spouses clams up, holding everything in and refusing to share. Refusing to say what is bothering them. What is the problem? Oh, nothing. Everything's fine. It's clear that everything's fine. Nobody knows you like I know you. Your demeanor has changed. You're not yourself. What is bothering you? Nothing. Or both of the spouses refuses to have meaningful dialogue. Underscore the word meaningful dialogue. Both parties, and what's a meaningful dialogue? It's when both parties contribute to the discussion. The discussion is what? It's a pool, and both of them are pouring what? Pouring into that pool. Saying what they have to say, contributing to that discussion, but one person refuses to let that happen. Talking over the other person. Cutting them off. Refusing to let them speak. Or simply what? Simply not listening or making any genuine effort to understand what they're saying. I act like I'm listening. I'm sitting there, I'm quiet, I'm going, but I'm not listening. I'm just waiting for you to be quiet so I can respond. And in many cases, the person responds and you say, you didn't hear anything I said, did you? Your response is indicative of the fact you weren't listening. You're just waiting to what? To pounce. And so let me mention, ala ujala, some of the means that will help us to communicate effectively. Some of the things that we need to do to make sure that we're communicating effectively. And this is really, really important. These things are so important because we're struggling. We don't need to struggle. We just use these tools. So one of the means to communicate effectively is actively listening to your partner. Actively. Which means you listen to identify the problem and fix it. Even if it's what? If it's you. I'm listening. Okay. All right. I'm trying to figure out what is the problem. Because they might say a lot of things. Some people, when they talk secularly. They do what? They go around and around and around the problem, and they never actually identify it. But if you're listening close enough, you can what? You can tell what everything is pointing to. Some people are very linear. The problem is this. They identify the problem, and some people, they just circle the problem. But if you're listening, actively listening, you can what? Okay, I get it. It's this, isn't it? Number 2, you have to make your partner feel safe to say whatever they need to say. Even if you don't like it. or you don't agree with it. Which means you can't get mad. You can't become violent. You can't become verbally abusive. They can say whatever they want to say, and they feel safe to say whatever they want to say, and nothing is going to happen. That's going to make them say, you know what? I'm not going to speak my mind. I don't feel safe to speak my mind. Number 3, validate their feelings. Are feelings wrong? Are feelings wrong? Feelings are not wrong. What you did, or the way they interpret what you did to create those feelings, the interpretation could be wrong. But the feeling is not wrong. Somebody says, I don't feel appreciated. Are they wrong? No, they know how they feel. But maybe they misinterpret your actions, which make them feel unappreciated. But if the feeling is not wrong, that's how they feel. So when they say, I feel unappreciated, I feel like you don't love me, I feel that you don't care about our relationship, you have to validate those feelings. Okay, I understand, and I respect that. I respect your feelings. I respect you have a right to feel that way. Whatever it is, but you validate, you don't dismiss. Another means is reiterating what you've understood to make sure you've understood correctly. They say, they spill. They spill. This. Okay. All right. I just want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. Are you saying Kate to a Kate to a Kate? The reason why you do this is because you're given the opportunity to say, no, you misunderstood me, so that they can clarify. So you always reiterate, this is what I'm hearing you say. Am I hearing you correctly? Another means to communicate effectively is when you hold yourself up to the light of their complaints and you acknowledge any and all wrongdoing. For example, we gave the example of a few sessions back where we said that, let's say that the husband, he says something that hurts the wife's feelings. And she says, you said this and it hurt my feeling. So now she's making a complaint. She's pointing out something you said or you did. And you hold yourself, did I say that? You hold yourself up to the light of it. Did I actually say that? And then if you're wrong, you do what? You admit, yeah, I did say that. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. You admit, you apologize sincerely. But the next one, this is important to communicate effectively. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Say what you mean and mean what you say. Somebody asks you, your spouse asks you, do you love me? In your heart, you love that person. But you say everything except, I love you. Do you love me? You're tall. You're handsome. You wear nice clothes. You've made this beautiful home for us. I'm asking you, in anywhere in those statements, did she say, yes, I love you? So did she say what she meant and mean what she said? Because the message that the person is going to get, if in her heart she really loves him, she didn't convey that message. In fact, the message she conveyed was that, no, I don't. That's the message she conveyed. She didn't mean to convey that, but she didn't say what she meant and mean what she said. Give you another example. Somebody says, husband or wife, I want a divorce. I want out of this marriage. They don't really want out of it. They just want what? They want you to stop doing this thing that's hurting them. Then why do you say that? Because a woman says to a man, I want out. He says, what? Untitled. You're divorced then. And then they're divorced. And a month later or 2 months later, it's like, that's not what I wanted. I just wanted him to pay more attention to me. I wanted him to do this. I wanted him to do that. So say what you mean and mean what you say. But last but not least from the means, express yourself constructively. We kind of pointed to this or alluded to this earlier. Silent treatment is not good. Sarcasm is not good. Insults are not good. Threats are not good. They hurt instead of help. They harm instead of benefit. So when you're going to express yourself to your spouse, do so constructively. Do so in a way that's going to improve not make things worse. The last point I'm going to make, or the last tool in our toolkit, is intervention. And I'll just say about this, ala ujala, that look, the reality is that there's some problems and there's some issues, differences which are irreconcilable. The couple, they just can't. They can't themselves. They can't fix it. They're unable to fight fair. They're unable to see the other person's perspective. They're unable to reach reconciliation, and they just keep what? They just keep going at it. In those cases, they need a referee. They need a disinterested third party who will come in and basically point out where this person is not fighting fair, where this person is wrong or asking something they're not entitled to. Whatever it is, you need that sometimes. You need intervention. And this is proven by the ayah that we mentioned earlier, and we're mentioning it here again, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَإِنْ خِفْتُمْ شِقَاقَ بَيْنِهِمَا فَبَعْثُوا حَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهِ وَحَكَمًا مِنْ أَهْلِهَا. If you fear that the couple are going to what? Part ways because of these irreconcilable differences, then appoint an arbiter from his family, an arbiter from her family. إِن يُرِيدَ إِصْلَاحًا يُوَفِّقِ اللَّهُ بَيْنَهُمَا. If they really want to reconcile, Allah will make it happen. Allah will make harmony if they really want that. But sometimes they need what? They need intervention. One of the problems that we have in the Muslim community, and I'll close with this, is that we prefer to suffer in silence as opposed to solicit help from the outside to fix our problems. And one of the reasons why we prefer to suffer in silence is because we fear embarrassment. We feel the embarrassment. What will people say if they knew that me and my wife were having problems? They're so worried about maintaining an image, a perception of themselves as being perfect, instead of worrying about what really is important, and that is how to save this marriage. I don't care if I'm embarrassed. If we can save this marriage, if we can salvage this marriage, it's worth the embarrassment. If there's any embarrassment, and I'm asking you, I'll be honestly, there's no shame. There's no shame in reaching an impasse and needing help to get past that rough patch and get back on track. There's no shame in that. But a lot of us, we're so worried about what other people are going to say and how we're going to be perceived, is that we don't seek help when we need help. And this is an important tool that Allah has mentions it in the Quran. Intervention, seek help when you need help. And with that, brothers and sisters, we'll bring today's session to a close. Unfortunately, we have done an hour, and so there is no time for questions. I apologize for that. I imagine there are probably a lot of them. But again, I like to keep it at an hour. I even feel like an hour is too much. 45 minutes is better. It's just, this was an important topic. There was a lot that we had to say. And so what we can do, if there are questions, and people really want to get those questions answered, we can do one of two things. We can do another session on Thursday of this week, which is what we did the first week when we had a lot of questions. We can do it on Clubhouse. The other option would be to email the questions. I can compile all of those, and maybe we can answer them at the beginning of the next session, even if it means having to add an additional session. We wanted to finish next week. We may have to push it out one additional week, but we'll do what we have to do to make sure that we get the questions answered. And with that, we'll bring today's session to a close. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you all for coming.
I still have a question.
تفضل.
The Pt.4.
Yes, sir.
When you mentioned it before, I looked it up, and there's several different ones by different authors.
Right.
So we want to get ahead of the curve and order it.
We need to go ahead and...
Which particular one are you...
Ahsan. Very good point. So what I have to do you want me to send a link and then put it, drop in the group?
All have the same book.
All have the same book. I agree with you. Very important. I will take care of that tomorrow, inshallah.
Okay.
Could we give you the money and you could order for all of them?
I really don't want to do that, but I think but we can do.
Or somebody could be appointed to do that.
Yeah, we might be able to do it through camps.
Or do we just give you the link and you order for all of us?
So we might be able to do it through camps like we did with the items for the inmates. We might be able to do that. So let me consult with Habib and the others, and then I'll let you know. That's a good idea. We can do that.
I didn't know that there's so many different ones.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's so many different translations. I think it's the same book in Arabic, but there's so many different translators who translate it in different commentaries, and we don't want the commentary, we just want the book. But I think there's one by Dar es Salaam that we'll use, inshallah.
Yeah, they have different price points too, that's for sure.